Hello everyone, today I'm going to show you a very easy technique you can use in Godot to easier sort out your load orders. I've seen a lot of people who have problems with load orders because they use the ready function or the enter3 function, and it gets difficult to predict in which order stuff is going to be loaded in, and it can cause a lot of problems. So what you want to do instead is to create an auto load like I have done here called load manager. In it I have set up some load steps as an enum. These load steps each has a wait frame in between. That is because often when I add nodes, I use call deferred because this doesn't cause problems. It causes problem with the physics engine and stuff if you add nodes directly. So then you have to wait one frame before the nodes are added. And by having some waiting frames, you ensure that before the next step is triggered, all nodes that were, or all call deferred calls have been resolved. So how does this load manager work? We have this signal here that will tell anyone who's listening that the load step has been triggered. The first thing we do on enter3 is we connect to our own signal so that we can trigger the next step whenever the previous step was triggered. To start the loading, someone would simply call this function start loading, which I do inside my loading example node up here. I call start load. That's all I do. This one calls the trigger load step, which is the function right below it, which simply starts on the 0th step. These things are indexed 0. This is 0. This is 1, 2, 3, and so on. So when we start on the 0th step, we just send a signal out saying that we have triggered this step. Now, as we saw earlier, we are connected to this signal ourselves. So when we get this signal that we sent up here, we will check if we still have more steps left, and if so, we call the next step, or the current step plus 1 on the next frame with a deferred call. So that means that we are calling one loading step every frame. And if we look at the code of the rest of this project, you can see here we have a root node, an interface root. What we do here is we connect to the loading. And when we get a load step, we check, is this the preload step? If so, we're gonna spawn in. Here we're spawning in a node. We use add child in a deferred call, which means that it's gonna be added to the tree on the next frame. And then if we get to the final load step, we're just gonna disconnect. We do this so that if you're loading stuff progressively into your game, you can actually just trigger this loading cycle again and again, and anything that has finished loaded is no longer connected. So you don't only have to use this at scene start, you can use this whenever, as long as you remember to disconnect previously loaded things once they're finished loading. And finally, we have this label that we were adding, and we do the same thing here. We connect to the loading signal, and also we print out when we are entering the tree so that you can see it in the console. And here we are doing something on 2 steps. During the second load step, we are setting some label text, and during the final load step we are setting the position and disconnecting. So if I run this, you will see we have a label here set at some position with the text, and if you look in the console, you can see each of the steps as it's going through. It's triggering the first load, and you can see that this spawning in label is triggered here. And then, as I mentioned, the ready of the loaded label, this one is called on the next frame because with a deferred call, you're not added to the tree until the next frame, and this is why we have this wait frame. And then you can see the rest of the stuff happening afterwards. So this is a very simple technique to ensure that you always have the correct load order. This can be very useful, and to add more loading steps, all you need to do is just add them to the list here. Just comma and do like this. You don't need to have the waiting frames if you don't need them, or add more waiting frames, do what you want. You can find the source for this in the description of the video, and hopefully this is useful to you. Thanks.